Welcome to the inaugural episode of Utility Fireside Chats here on X Spaces and streamed on every major platform. And I'm really excited to have my friend and business partner and partner in many different areas of life, Ted Hahs. Ted is the founder of Innovate, and you can see his smiling face here on the screen. And we're together here at the Beach House. Ted also has been on my team for 11 years. I'm very fortunate. I have people that have been with me like Ted for over a decade that we've built multiple organizations together. So Ted is our chief of ethics at Attention Live. He has helped launch Web3 AI, our industry education company. And there are many, many things that we work on together. Ted brings a unique blend of faith, leadership, and maybe most importantly, the tangible, practical, social impact that he has done in Silicon Valley and beyond. It'll be fun to dive in and actually have a professional production team. There's so many times Ted and I have captured content on riding on our one wheels with a cell phone. One time I got myself hurt, not hurt too bad, but we might tell that story. Quick shout out to Ted. You should follow him at TEDHAHS, also his podcast, which is also an event that brings together the greatest tech leaders and nonprofit leaders in the Silicon Valley and beyond. He'll talk about that. That is at Innovate, spelled with a 3 I-O. So INNOVAT 3 I-O. And be sure to subscribe to Innovate, the podcast. He's on his second season, and that is on Spotify, Apple, and podcasts, and wherever you get your podcasts. Before I bring Ted in, finally, I intend to start doing these fireside chats. I have actually done over 1,000 live streamed interviews. Mostly they are at tech conferences, and I grab the keynote speaker and we sit down and talk for 5 minutes or an hour, or it's on Zoom and I have people that are speakers at events that I'm co-producing pop in. And it's allowed me to get to know so many of the important people across the Web3 blockchain space and the AI automation space. But I recognize, like, what a beautiful location. And so maybe, why don't we have you join me, Ted, on screen, and everyone can get to see us. Let's bring this bad boy into focus. Come, let's use the force. Come on, camera, you can do it. We'll see. The camera looks a little fuzzy. Maybe it's just me. Regardless, why don't we dive in? Here we have the beautiful Pacific Ocean behind us. The oldest, this is the Venetian. It's the oldest resort in all of California.
Wow,
and
really?
Yeah. Dated back about 150 years. We have the wharf, Capitol Wharf, just got restored. The Soquel Creek comes and creates this amazing lagoon. And so it's, I think, a nice thing for me to be able to do these fireside chats here in my home.
Oceanside chats.
Yeah, they're Oceanside chats. Maybe we'll change the name. Utility's Oceanside chats. Although I intend to do these as I travel and do other things.
There's a big ball of fire right there.
That's why we're not outside. See, the live stream ends outside right around 10 a.m. because the sunrise hits this thing and turns it into a rainbow. And it's all good until about 10. Then the burning fire in the sky comes, and we must move inward. So Ted, I did a little intro, but why don't you introduce yourself to me? I already know everything about you. Maybe you can surprise me with something new. But yeah, give the folks that are tuning in a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am a career social entrepreneur, and I like to break the ice by saying I've been in and out of prison for the last 18 years.
You've been working out in prison?
I've been working out.
You've been dunking on the criminals in prison?
Not really dunking. No, I can't do that anymore. But that's one of the things I do. I've been playing basketball inside San Quentin prison. I've never been incarcerated. But we go in and play basketball with the incarcerated brothers. And it's
almost
incredible.
2 decades, right?
Yeah, almost 2 decades.
Okay.
Yeah, 18. I guess this is my 19th year. And it's just an incredible experience. And that's, what I'm all about is the intersection of innovation and social impact, which I believe is the most exciting forefront to be at. And it's all about, we've got supercomputers. I mean, this fact that we're using iPhones and we're communicating around the world in this communication infrastructure, that wasn't, I can remember when I got my first iPhone, it was Sandra was pregnant with Anna, so that would have been 27 years ago.
Wow.
And I bought my first iPhone because when she was about to pop, I wanted to be sure I could be on 24/7 call.
With your last daughter?
My first daughter.
Interesting.
The 26-year-old. So.
Keep going.
So what I'm saying is this technology infrastructure that has completely changed the world is amazing. And what's happened in the last 3 decades in Silicon Valley is unprecedented. The amount of wealth we've created, I mean, any other time in history, it's uncomparable. But yet at the same time, human trafficking's increased, homelessness has increased, unequal access to justice has increased, food insecurity has increased. So like, the area that I would argue is the most important to innovate. How do we take care of the least of these? How do we create human flourishing for everyone, not just the elites, not create a haves versus the have-nots? We've been going the negative direction. But I'm super hopeful. That's why we resonated. That's why we're lifetime, over a decade friends,
right,
connected, is this optimism. But not just an optimism, pie in the sky, everything will be okay. No, but an optimism which is a hope, which means we're going to go make the future.
Right.
And that I believe we can innovate on all these things. I believe we can act upon them and see the greatest season of human flourishing ever. So that's what Innovate's all about. That's what I'm all about. Well, that's what Attention Live is all about, too.
In many ways. You know, you and I both were at the same organization in the past. So we were with Dr. Ed Silvoso,
yes.
Transform Our World. You led his media and did a lot of things, helped to run his events. And he brought me in as his entrepreneur resident.
Organization, yes.
So in many ways, that was what kind of sparked some of these ideas around faith and action. So if a lot of nonprofit organizations are tied to faith, right? So whether that's like religious institutions that people go to once a week, or it's groups that try to feed the hungry, house the folks that don't have housing, provide counseling to those that need counseling, Mary, Barry, whatever it may be. There's all these kind of faith-oriented things. And then businesses, Silicon Valley and tech companies and just companies in general, they're about action, right? Action, build products and services, bring those to market, make money, make things happen. So talk to me about the process of launching Innovate, here in the Silicon Valley, and of how you've approached to transform the Bay Area, bringing together these two diverse groups that don't always intermingle together. The business arena that's all about action, performance, savagery, and the faith arena that's all about nobility and service and empathy, and how you bring these two things together. And what's the benefit of Innovate bringing these people together in events and podcasts, etc.?
Well, I'm always about bringing people together, and I think that's what's exciting. And that's kind of, my background. I mean, I was a math major in college, and I also was a minor, two different things. And our society has evolved, like the explosion of knowledge. So there's been silos. We're all in silos. And so it's impossible to be, an expert in every area. The whole idea of a Renaissance man is difficult in the sense that you can't be a true expert in every area, but we've become so siloed. We've all experienced it in any field, An expert will have an incredible amount of knowledge, but you get him 1 degree out of his area of expertise and their knowledge drops incredibly.
Right.
So what this means now is the void is for those who can cross barriers and bring people from different silos together to collaborate. Steve Jobs was one of the first of these. Why did we all love him so much? Is the intersection of design and artistry with, functionality and technology. So, the Apple products, whether you love them or hate them, are this combination of art and function very much. And that's why we love that so much. So, I feel there's such an excitement. So getting back to the idea of faith, you described one as nobility and one is just delivering, the business area. You dive in and there's nobility in the business area.
No doubt.
There's a lot of savagery
in the faith area, no doubt.
And when we can come together and bring those two together and truly learn, you know, like I think the biggest obstacle, the biggest challenge for America is sectarianism, where we dive into the points of view and we're all trying to prove our dogma as opposed to learning. And, you know, if we can listen and listen to those who disagree with us, that's when the magic happens. That's when we learn things.
So maybe give a little more background on how you got into first the global nonprofit sector that was, you know, the way I would describe Transform Our World was building case studies of city and country transformation, bringing together all sectors of society, business, faith, government, media, etc. But before that, you were a pro ball player. And before that, you played basketball in college as you're getting your math and literature major. So take us through athletics. What made you a great athlete, enough to compete in college, enough to compete at a pro level? And what got you there? And how did you bridge
I'll just
so how'd you bridge that over to how you transitioned into kind of
it's
the
very
faith
much
sector?
an organic process. And I'll just go back to the beginning. You know, Steph Curry said something, they were talking about faith, and does faith give you an advantage and make you better? And he gave, you know, he says, faith doesn't make you better at basketball. Hard work makes you better at basketball. But so for me, I had a life-changing encounter when I was in college. And basketball was my dream. That was my thing. But I came to a realization that I did not have the power within me to fulfill and to live according to my own ideals. And specifically for me, it's like, okay, I'm captive. I was never an addict. I was never went the direction that ended me up in incarcerated. But now, you know, I'm in my 50s now. You look back, you have some perspective. I realized the same weaknesses were in me, and I had those same tendencies. I have a highly addictive personality. And so I had these ideals to live up, to train really hard, to become a great basketball player. But I wasn't. I was heading another direction. And that was the encounter where I reached out to what I knew. I had been raised in a faith environment. I had been shared the message of a higher power, of Jesus, who gives us the power when we don't have it. And suddenly that message became very real for me. That's like, okay, I need power to change. And so I reached out and I surrendered my life to Jesus. That was the beginning of my personal faith walk. And it was transformative. So yes, Jesus doesn't make you better at basketball, but he certainly will give you power, self-will, work inside of you to bring out the best inside of you. And that was transformative for me. Then, you know, I had an opportunity to go down to Argentina with Dr. Ed Savosa when I was in college. And I saw and experienced this incredible social transformation. Now, at the time, we understood it very much from a paradigm of a religious spiritual awakening. We called it a revival. But, you know, you look back, you can put different language on it. Argentina went through the dirty war was just deeply traumatized time as a nation, and they were beaten down. And then healing and restoration and hope came from the inside out that was healing the nation. And it was beautiful. And I got to experience that. And then as we dove in and started to learn and say, wow, maybe there's something about faith that can be more than just what we say we believe, but we can go out and demonstrate it to take care of the city, to take care of the community in dramatic ways. That was my actual original introduction to prison ministry. I visited a prison in Argentina. And the prison had transformed itself from the inside out, led by the incarcerated brothers who found faith and lived it out by caring for one another. And this maximum security prison was run by the incarcerated brothers and became a place of peace and joy. It was amazing and incredible. That was the beginning of it.
You know, I've been into prisons and done some outreach type stuff. And one of the most powerful things was in a prior life, about 20 years ago, I had a commune. I had 30 people that lived at my home. We traveled through Asia, Europe, and the States, did about 200 concerts, pumped out 4 albums. So I remember our bass player, we didn't know a lot about him, but we took his wife, his 3 children, and his oldest daughter had a 6-month old. It's a long story, but basically it all happened to where next thing you know, we're bringing the 4 Hawaiians around the world with us. So we're at this Indiana prison. We got invited to do music there. And he gets up, the bass player, and he shares his testimony of like how his life was transformed through following Jesus. And he tells a story about how when he used to be a muscle and he'd go be muscle for, bad guys, and he starts crying. He goes, I remember one time I shoved a gun in a newborn's mouth. And I told the parents, if you don't pay me the money right now, I'm going to blow your kid's head off. And I remember thinking, like, dude, that's too heavy for the criminals, bro. Like, you're not supposed to tell that story to anybody. But I think that's part of the point of you and your peers being present, not just in trying to do things in the Silicon Valley where it's fun and sexy, but doing things in San Quentin and other prisons where you guys are going in and being present. Because some part of it is just being present with people. And so maybe you could also share a bit about some of the organizations involved in Innovate that are providing legal services to those that can't afford it, for getting people out of human trafficking and then getting them trained in new vocations, helping fathers that get out of incarceration still reconnect with their children. So there's some wonderful organizations that are partnered with Innovate, and some of these people have stories maybe not as bad as shoving a handgun into a kid's mouth and threatening a parent, but still, if it's not that, it's still something that they got on the wrong path. And oftentimes it is, whether it's a Christian faith or a different faith paradigm, or even just the simplicity of how AA prays, like, I have dependency upon my creator. But there's something about leaning into a spiritual paradigm that can oftentimes set a human free from the shame, the guilt, the old identity they once had. And like a caterpillar going and coming out a butterfly, or like a snake shedding its skin and having this refreshing renewal and revival of their own life. So maybe you can share a bit more about that, because that was just a story that came to mind of like, what was the toughest thing I ever heard at a prison? And it wasn't a prisoner sharing it. It was one of the guys that I was touring with in music.
That's a beautiful extreme example, but we we experience that every time we go in. And we come in, it's just the power of showing up, and it's not about saying what we believe or whatever, it's just living it out. And we always receive more. And like some people will say to me, they hear that, go, oh, great, you must be a great mentor. I'm glad you're giving back to those young men. And yes, I love the opportunity to do that. But what really comes to my heart is my friend like Brian, who I met inside prison, who's out now, who is part of the Innovate. He's part of my advisory board, formerly incarcerated, now on parole. He is such an incredible mentor to me. And I look at the impact that he had while he was still in prison. He was in for nearly 30 years. And it was about halfway through that he really transformed his life. And when I was at his resentencing hearing what impacted me the most was they had at least a half a dozen young men who referred to him as Uncle B. They had waited for 3 hours on Zoom to talk to the judge for 3 minutes. And they were out of prison already. They said it was Uncle B who inspired me to change and then mentored me. And he trained me in a profession. And now they were working in media production outside. And it was so beautiful to see how a man, while he was still incarcerated, everything against him so difficult. And then you hear the trauma he went through when he was raised. It's just heartbreaking. And you realize, wow, I don't think I would have done near as good as he did if I had gone through that. And now he's turned his life around and having such impact while he was still incarcerated. So it's the power of showing up and receiving more. You mentioned human trafficking too. another organization. And again, it's the power of just bringing people together. So I work with Love Never Fails. The founder is Vanessa Russell. She's part of the founding team of Innovate and one of our closest partners. And she's been a guest on the Innovate podcast multiple times. I also had the privilege of interviewing a couple of her lived experience experts.
Right.
They're survivor leaders who've been young ladies who have gone through human trafficking themselves and have now overcome that, gotten out of that, and are now advocates and leaders. They're amazing people. One of the things they're doing, they have a holistic solution. They go out into the streets and they rescue. It's primarily young women who are involved. I mean, it's across the board. This non-discriminatory. You know, sex trafficking is primarily women. There's also a huge issue with you know, immigrants and workers, you know, who are trafficked as well. And they have a holistic solution. They have safe houses. They have rehab programs. They started a IT Biz Academy that we've helped them with, and they train these people who are at high risk of human trafficking in careers, for tech careers, and they're doing a wonderful, amazing job at it. They do what's technically called trauma-informed training.
Yeah.
Okay. But another thing that they're doing now is getting involved in advocacy, because we've passed, you know, one of the issues with Innovate, the premise is our system is broken. We spend lots and lots of money, and we in the Bay Area pride ourselves as being merciful, being a place that's open to outcasts, to be a city of refuge. But people are lonely, they're hurt, and in all these negative trends, we're at the front of the line. We're not at the back. Like, we are one of the hotbeds for human trafficking right here in the Bay Area. This isn't a foreign problem, this is a domestic problem. And then we pass these laws under the guise of wanting to be merciful, you know, wanting to no longer hurt women who are just practicing the world's, you know, oldest trade. But the outcome really empowers traffickers, not women. And the women are minorities and they're victims. So Vanessa had a revelation to realize we can help victims as much as we want, but if we don't get involved in change policy, we're going to keep losing the war.
Right.
So they got involved. This was after a bill that was passed, I think 2 years ago, that legalized solicitation for the sake of prostitution.
They did that to protect the prostitute that's being human trafficked, because what would happen is they'd get busted. The wealthy guy that hired her would run off, not deal with any consequences. The woman would basically deal with the consequences. And there's all sorts of brokenness
they
around
had
the
a rhetoric
situation
behind it of why they passed it, and they passed it through, and it was very much, we're discriminating, we're prosecuting. But the law actually meant that if a man goes out there and is looking for prostitutes, he's not allowed to, well, it's primarily men, okay?
Right.
He's not allowed to be stopped. So the actual outcome of that meant that on the Blade, or the red light district where the girls go, the police, the law enforcement, their hands were further tied to intervene at all. And it's the human traffickers that were given a free pass, and the victims were the young ladies.
So
and this happened. This was a bad law that
I remember what happened,
ago.
because I remember talking with some of the prostitutes that were in that business before the pandemic, and they were explaining how excited they were about this law happening to protect them and their peers. What you're saying is that the opposite outcome is what happened.
Yes.
I want to pause and I want to hit a few questions quickly, because I want to bring in two friends to come have a conversation.
Let me wrap that up. They've gotten involved, and what we have done is gotten the voice of survivors and have used AI to translate these complex laws into everyday English and empower the young, primarily minority survivors. And we've got them involved in the legislative process. And that law was just reversed by AB 347. It was just
I remember
reversed.
hearing about that.
There was a big national controversy. This just happened like within the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And so we're making progress and bringing voices that are outside of the process, bringing them in, breaking down walls, building bridges, getting everybody together, and we collaborate. That is when we make good policies, we make good decisions that have positive outcomes.
So I think in the last 20 minutes, people have been able to capture that Innovate has a dual mission. equipping leaders, and empowering the poor. But a question that might come up is, why are you the chief of ethics at a tech company, Attention Live? Why are you involved in the businesses and lives of my peers that are tech, leaders? How are you bridging technology and spirituality? How are you doing ministry in the heart of the tech capital? Can you speak into that process for a moment? Then I want to ask you just a couple other quick questions before we
If we
transition.
describe ministry by by our creed, what we say we believe, if we describe faith by what we say we believe, then it gets really complicated, you know? But if we can rechange and redefine that, so me as a person I'm a follower of Jesus, I believe in the scriptures. That's the core of who I am. But when I look at so many of my friends who are becoming more and more sectarian because they're holding into their beliefs and they're feeling persecuted, I'm like, as I dive into the scriptures, as I dive in to get closer to who this person was who founded the faith, what I see is passages like in Matthew 25, where he's exhorting us, saying, it's all about what you do. You can say what you believe, but show me what you believe by showing love to the least of these.
Mm.
And what I found is if you define your faith by what you do and just say, just judge me by what you do. Like, I don't tell people about what I say I believe. I talk about what I'm excited about, my friends and the human trafficking world and the survivor leaders, or my deep friends that I built through going into prison. And these seem like two different worlds, and how faith have brought them together. And then if you look a little deeper, you see the guys who are incarcerated who maybe committed sex crimes, or maybe who committed whatever they did, violent crimes. You go back to their childhood and you see they had the same aces as a victim, and it's two different directions they took, and the power of bringing them together now is beautiful. The power happens. So what I found is in the tech world, if we say we're Christians and thump a Bible, like, what's the point of that? But if we say, no, we're passionate about making the world better, and let's work together and let's judge ourselves by our results and let's learn from each other, the door is wide open. Technologists want to make the world better.
Over my shoulder is a thing I saw when I was 17 years old. It's a wanted poster about Jesus Christ. It has nothing religious on it. I think most pastors might get a chuckle, but it's not really the way that they frame things. Right? This poster says he's dangerous. Don't let young people around him. He transforms the way that they think. He's a homeless guy, no money. He's, doing all these things that are causing people to follow him. He's ruining the establishment. He's
a revolutionary.
He's unending the faith establishment, government establishment, and business establishment. It's easy to look at Jesus and think, no one ever did more for children. No one ever did more for women. It's also easy to understand that if you look at the story, which has been told pretty well through media lately, it wasn't ever transactional. So you and I weren't there 2,000 years ago, but the way it's told is he had the ability to do crazy miracles, right? People that were blind could see, people that were deaf could hear, people that were mute could speak, people that were lame could walk, people that were dead came out of the grave. But it was never transactional. He never did, he never did something where it was like, hey, you give me this money and I will. Or he also never did, hey, if you change your life and you start doing these things I demand and you stop doing these things I don't want you to, then I will. And so he was very much comfortable with the prostitute. He was comfortable with the criminal. He was comfortable with those that were the drug dealers, or those that were the poor and the homeless and the downcast of the world. But I think there's something significant about what you've done in the Silicon Valley with faith organizations and nonprofits, where it's not just exclusively tech companies or not just exclusively Jesus nonprofits. You're able to work with all sorts of nonprofits, with all sorts of faith paradigms. You're able to work with all sorts of businesses that have products and services that are serving people. And you have a very inclusive view of how you go about doing this. So when you think about the future for faith-driven innovation, what's next for you? What's next for Innovate?
Wow, that's a lot. What's next? Well, I believe my gift is to be a catalyst. You know, I want to get things started. I don't really care who gets the credit. Somebody, I don't know if Ronald Reagan actually said it, but somebody on the internet says that Ronald Reagan said that there's no limit to what a man can do if he doesn't care who gets the credit. You know, I've tried to see how far we can push that. You know, um, but I want to influence a movement. And I believe that the forefront of innovation, which what we're known for, and social impact, if we can figure those two things out, like I want the idea of a chief of ethics. First of all, the way we defined it is not, you know, ethics like let's make sure we don't do anything wrong. That'd be like a defensive team, a basketball team that only plays defense. You can play it at a very, very elite level, but unless you also have to score, you know. You're not going to win. Okay.
Right.
We define it by, yes, let's not do anything wrong, but let's point through and make sure we're doing the right things.
Yeah.
And how, to me, it's more, we all have the same ideals. We often compromise along the way, and then we hide and we like to lie. And the worst lies are the lies we believe ourselves, you know, but we all have the same ideals, and it's about living those out. And how do we manifest this? How do we build infrastructure? How do we build technological tools that don't have the unintended consequences? Like Facebook's amazing, okay? The infrastructure we have, these were tools and they're miracles and they've helped us so much. I don't think anybody wanted tech to now be something that is destroying the mental health of young people, not soul, but it's contributing to negative mental health. I don't think anybody wanted or foresaw the sectarian and the fake news and, you know, that this infrastructure would increase silos. We didn't foresee that.
Right.
So now we, as who are building like in the Web3 and the AI, rather than just pointing the finger at the previous generation, we better humble ourselves and learn from them. What I see next is I want the whole idea of a chief of ethics and the way we define it to be something that's just accepted, that everyone does it. And like people are thinking through, how is this going to make the world better? And not just, it's not just going to be profitable, and is thinking it through holistically. And is saying, are you truly thinking through how is this going to affect the people that you don't think technology is going to affect? Or how can we build technology to serve those who are most disenfranchised? I feel that's an exciting forefront. And I want everyone in Silicon Valley to get excited about that. And I want Silicon Valley in the Bay Area and Santa Cruz, I want them to rise up and say, listen, we have always prided ourselves in being a city of refuge, of being a place where people who aren't accepted elsewhere can come here. I want us to see a resurrection of that and a renaissance of that, and say, now let's have the humility and the transparency to walk it out and to truly hold ourselves accountable to a higher standard, and let's solve the world's most important problems. And I believe we have the creativity here to do it.
And that's why I love being your partner, my friend.
That's why I love being your partner, man. And I love
you said it with so much more enthusiasm. I believe when you said it more than when I said it.
Thank you.
All right, let's bring in Xiao and Grim. So if we want to transition to that, hello, my friends. Welcome to the party. Thank you for being here. I'll just look at this camera so that we can all hang out and look at each other. Xiao, why don't I throw the microphone over to you? You got to sit here and listen to Ted and I the last 25 minutes. You and Grim and I have talked about this moment, me wanting to bring Ted in and kind of kickstart this process. I gave you and Grim some idea a bit about Ted's background and innovate and what we do. So I'd love for you to kind of kick off our open dialogue.
Yeah, I want to first just commend both of you. I think what you guys are doing is really like threading the needle, you know, with regards to, you know, the maturation of both technology and the way it intersects with humanity. You guys are touching upon so many different areas where I feel it's needed, because
as a traditional like correction, right, where innovation is kind of leading our lives versus us using technology as a tool, right? There's becoming a gap, and I'd love to know is how, Ted, for you, like what led you to start Innovate, and how did your vision evolve over time, given that the technology and the shift, whether pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, like there's been a huge shift and need for humanity to really kind of evolve in a way that kind of marries these things versus like, some of these traditional conventions that we might have had decades ago. We have to like evolve, and so would love to hear more about the genesis, the origin of what brought about Innovate.
Well, really, Innovate is the totality of my 30 years experience as a social entrepreneur. So I started out, I played basketball in college, and then I had the privilege to go play basketball professionally overseas in Portugal. And I was there at the time when they were combating the worst heroin epidemic in Western history. So it's kind of like a foreshadow of the whole current drug epidemic we're facing with fentanyl, and that was just, learning by making mistakes, and they're on the front lines, and it's just been an evolution over time, and seeing what happens, the power of collaboration. If we're divided, if we're making judgments, if we're pointing the finger, we end up falling in the same trap, But if we can learn, if we can humble ourselves, and then, just having amazing relationships. And another thing that has happened, I mean, I have been saying this kind of all along in many different ways, believing that, some people say the Silicon Valley is cynical, they're not spiritual, they only care about money. They're certainly demographically, they're the place that goes to church the least in our nation. But I have always seen a deep, deep, deep hunger for true spirituality. I have always seen a deep hunger to truly walk this out in idealism. And COVID and the lockdown was certainly a catalyst. And then seeing the pain, but also having this insight in this realization that the technological revolution didn't already happen. Like many people think that the technological information revolution, we're on the tail end of it. No, we've just been warming up. The real technological innovation is happening right now, and it's going to be accelerated. And what's going to happen in the next, we don't know the period of time. It might be another decade, it might be another 2 decades, but it might just be 5 years. And we are experiencing the biggest disruption that humanity has ever seen. And to see this convergence of technology and tools, what we can do with them, what we're intended to do with them, and also the problem that's coming, and it's like the technological innovation is driving both of them. So it's just this convergence of things, and now is the time. And so let's jump in, and I feel I was made for this. Of course, Ian's been a huge influence on this, because we've had, in many ways, very similar careers, but mine has very much been full-time social entrepreneur, full-time in the nonprofit. He's been full-time immersed in technology. He's been a serial entrepreneur, starting tech company after tech company, and then he's on the side volunteering his time to nonprofits. And this connection, and then this open door, and seeing that if we can bring those two together, that's when beautiful things can happen, and now is the time.
I love that. I want to
Awesome.
ask something
This
because
is like
do you hear me, Shao?
We can hear you.
Oh yeah, because I think Shao was a bit delayed. I'm seeing the current landscape, with the political issues and how to communicate accordingly, and being open about one's true spirituality. And what is the challenges that you guys are facing, or that you think that like should be approached and should be handled in this situation where you have, such a political structure right now?
So the way I think it through is, if you took a scale of 1 to 10, get my hand out of Ted's face. If you took a scale of 1 to 10, if 1 and 2 is where you demonize people in organizations, it's where you start to call people evil and corrupt and unredeemable. And if 9s and 10s is where you glorify people, they're your hero, they're the best, they're the savior. So the first thing that I think about in terms of being able to collaborate with a lot of people in technology, in nonprofit, bringing those things together, for me and Ted to be able to collaborate, is to not live in the areas of 1 through 3 and 8 through 10. So first of all, I'm trying to stay in that like 4 to 7 range, because that 4 to 7 range keeps me from demonizing or glorifying, which then keeps me from trying to fight for my little niche belief. Now, some beliefs are big, like I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, I'm an independent, I'm a theist, I'm an atheist, I'm agnostic. Oh, no, I'm a Jew, I'm a Christian, I'm a Muslim, I'm a Hindu. Like these are big, big, big beliefs. But then even across these beliefs, there's all these micro beliefs, right? There's a joke that was said, you know, and I won't make it spiritual, I'll make it political because you asked political questions. So I'll change a little bit. But this guy is going to jump off a bridge. Another dude stops and runs out to him and don't do it, man, don't do it. And the guy goes, no, there's just nothing left to live for. I can't do it any longer. And then the guy notices he's wearing a red hat. He's like, you like Trump? Well, yeah, I mean, you know, how do you not like Trump? He's like, well, I like Trump. Like, man, I mean, think about Trump's just got back in office. And he goes, do you like RFK Jr.? Well, yeah, how can you not like RFK Jr., man? He's the health guy. Well, I like RFK Jr. And you like what's happening with tariffs? Well, yeah, you know, and then he start vibing on stuff. But then he finally asks him, like, well, what do you think about like the thing going on in the Middle East? And the guy goes, you know, I have a heart for Palestine. And the dude pushes him off the bridge. It's like they agreed on Trump, they agreed on tariffs, they agreed on RFK, but just over that little micro thing, which for some people is not micro, but you get the point of the thing. The point of the thing is that if we choose to set our mind as a Democrat, which is primarily 85% Democrats here in Santa Cruz, where I live, if we choose to set our mind as I'm a Democrat, or I am this around faith, or I believe this around philanthropy, or I believe this. But then if we get so narrow-minded on that thing, like I'm a philanthropist, but I only believe people should give to this type of thing. And if you give to anything like this type of thing, then it's worse that you're even a philanthropist at all. And so to me, this is the thing that I'm constantly checking myself in, right? Like, okay, before I speak, am I prepared to be critical in that 3, 4, 5 range? Am I prepared to be optimistic in that 5, 6, 7 range? Because if I'm ready to start going low in the 1s and 2s and start attacking, or start going high and making anybody around me feel like, oh God, Ian thinks that that's the best thing in the world. It's not even worth talking anymore because Ian's got a big personality and he went 9 and 10. So my answer on the political environment is it's every single individual's responsibility to communicate in a way that is attempting to be moderate and to find things that we have in common so that we don't find things that divide us and then focus on the division, but find things that unite us and then focus on progress. So that's how I think through it. But I think that was a great question, Grim.
Love that. Shao, go right ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is what I really gather, right? I think what both of you have that is, you know, not just leadership, but it's just the level of empathy and understanding of holding space for the people that you deal with, interact with, regardless if it's, you know, prisoners or whether it's, you know, CEOs. What I'm super interested in, because it kind of leads into it based off what we just talked about, you know, is how do you approach outreach in one of the most secular regions of the U.S.? Because I feel like this is an area where we have to be mindful of, but at the same time be inclusive.
Well, I can just tell you, since COVID, everything's changed. More and more people are beginning to see. So again, for me, it's if you lead with, like, here's how I use it. I'm a little depressed right now because was it last night?
The Warriors lost. So sad.
so sad the way it ended too. The best player in the world gets injured, and if they had just been able to win one more game.
If only you would have been on the team, Ted.
Yeah, if only I'd been on the team, they would have had an excuse. Okay, but I've never, Steph Curry. I love him. He's incredible player, undeniably the best shooter ever. I've never once seen him argue about the best way to shoot a basketball. You don't see him arguing with anybody. And, he does give master classes. He doesn't have to argue and prove that his way of shooting is the best because he's showing it all the time. Okay. And if you want to define outreach in the sense of this is what we say we believe, this is our creed, we want to argue with you and convince you that our creed is best. And if you don't agree with our creed, it's like that joke that he shared, it's like, you don't get anywhere. But I have found that if you just act like a human being and then go demonstrate what you do. So my message to people of faith is we need to represent ourselves as the ones who care for the poor. We do it with passion and we do it with excellence. And I found that when you take that approach and you add a little bit of humility with it, and maybe I don't know everything, and maybe I can learn from this person who's different than me. And, maybe just because this person votes different than me, there's something more importantly than how I'm registered politically. For me, that's my faith. But even deeper than that, it's that I'm a husband who loves my wife, who's trying to be the best husband I can be, who's a father who loves my kids. I go in there, and when you start talking about the kids, these guys who, in prison, who came from a very, very different background than me, very different lifestyle, grew up in a very different neighborhood, very different family structure. Man, we both love our kids. We're both aspiring to be the best fathers we can be. And if I can read that I'm a human first, they're a human, they've had experiences differently than me, maybe I can learn something. And maybe just because they vote different than me, maybe I want to know why they vote different than me, what's motivating them. And then maybe we can actually collaborate together. I've found, and I believe in collaboration, and I believe collaboration and unity is going to produce the best results. Even collaborating with people who are only going to criticize you, because I have blind spots. So I need to have people that think different than me, that see stuff, that are going to speak to me, and I'm going to have enough trust that I know they're not trying to destroy me, and I'm going to listen. And I found if you follow that approach, it's not difficult at all, like it's not hard. It's hard for me to get a young man to come join me to play basketball in prison the first time.
Right. Only the first
time. The second time, it is super easy.
It's hard for me to get Ted to invite me to come play.
So if anyone's watching this and you got some level of game, ping me.
Well, that's not very nice. There's my answer. Tell them about Adrian and what he's doing to help provide legal services for a moment, because to me, when there's practical, tangible service that meets a felt need, and there's an element of innovation around that, then there is no hard heart or boundary or stiff arm that's ever going to hit Adrian and his team of lawyers that are trying to protect the most vulnerable.
Well, there are long arms and things hitting him, but it's not over what he's doing. It's not over the ideals. It's not over the results he's getting. It's over people don't see it, and they don't, they're threatened maybe, or whatever reason it is. But Adrian is pioneering. It's with Open Door Legal. You can find them at opendoorlegal.org, Adrian Tirtanati, but they're on social media. They have a beautiful website. And they are pioneering our nation's first system of universal access to legal aid for civil law. So we are the only developed country that only provides legal aid in the case of criminal law. But we don't guarantee it in the case of civil law. And as a result, the poor are horribly exploited.
Right.
And when you patch this hole, metaphorically, I describe it as one of the reasons we get negative results with all the money we spend on social aid is because we like to build clinics at the bottom of a cliff and we'll help people after they fall off of the bottom. We actually don't build it at the bottom of the cliff. We build it 100 yards away. So after you fall off the cliff, and if you're able to survive the fall and crawl 100 yards, we'll help you, okay? It's very expensive and your options are limited. Maybe we should go to the top of the cliff and strengthen the guardrail so people stop falling off. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. That is what Adrian is doing, and it turns out that we have great laws to protect the poor, but because we don't have access, they don't have access to lawyers because they can't afford them, they're exploited and they get negative outcomes. What has happened is he's pioneering this. He's been around 10 years. A study just came out, a rigorous academic study that showed that they started in Bayview Hunters Point. In the last 10 years, 2013 to 2023, homelessness in Bayview Hunters Point district of San Francisco dropped 49%. Homelessness across the city increased during that time period. It dropped nearly half. Their study demonstrated not only that it dropped, but that their intervention was causal in the drop. They're using very sophisticated math, the same math that Vegas used to set odds and stuff like that, only even better. Then they projected forward and said, therefore, you can make a prediction that odds bettors would bet on that if you implement this intervention citywide, it would result in a 40% drop in homelessness. This is a peer-reviewed academic study that everyone could go, they could look at that, they can examine it and see if their math is right. This is just one, this is the latest one of many, many studies that shows how effective this intervention is to help avoid homelessness, to address domestic violence, to actually cause rates of domestic violence to drop, to decrease poverty because you're addressing wage theft and all these things, okay? He's doing an amazing job. The challenge is we are stuck in a box. There are many innovators, and to be honest, Adrian is the best innovator I know of in social services. I can honestly say that in my entire career, what they're doing is the most cutting edge as far as the biggest bang for your buck of how do we actually help the poor and they stay helped long term rather than just creating a dependency. Right. He's doing an incredible job. But the nonprofit world doesn't really reward innovation. So we have our priorities, and we want to address homelessness. Well, we have a framework, and then we thought if we want to address homelessness, let's get on the streets. You know, we know the connection between drug addiction and homelessness. Okay, so let's address this. Let's open more shelters. Let's help more people. And we don't think outside of the box. We don't have a category for legal aid, and if we do, it's not sexy. So we're not allocating our resources there. So that's the challenges he's facing up against. So a big shout out to Open Door Legal and get behind them and, you know, support them, champion them. Does that answer your question?
I'm glad you shared that. Yeah. Xiao, did you want to jump in with a question? I would have not asked had I heard your voice a half second earlier.
No, you're good. It just shows you the power of social impact, but more importantly, you know, social change in a way that, again, leads into understanding people, right? Understanding and having the self-awareness, having the ability to observe in ways that we can create the change and really having that dynamic ability to push, you know, the grain to kind of open up these changes. You know, in this regard, though, what I really want to know is you've done so many podcasts and spoken with so many different leaders and so many different people in different walks of life. Could you share a moment on your podcast that you felt, you know, probably that had the most deep impact to you personally?
You know, probably the two, they've all been very impactful. Probably the two that hit me the most were when I interviewed Teriel Bell and Alicia. They are lived experience experts, survivors of human trafficking. Both have different stories. And it just completely changed my worldview of what's happening there. You know, Teriel Bell is this beautiful young lady. She actually grew up in a middle-class Bay Area. So in the global scheme of things, it's a very prosperous, wealthy home. Her parents were pastors. She had very few indicators of this. She was adopted out of the foster care system, but that happened very, very young. So the only parents she ever knew were her adopted parents, and they loved her tremendously. She was on a she was on a track, so she's an elite track athlete. She was on a track scholarship at a university, and that's where she was trafficked and went through about 9 months of hell, and then turned her life around. And finally had enough courage to call her aunt. She felt so much shame that she thought her mother would reject her, but far from it. As soon as her mother found out, she put her in a hotel room and then flew her home the next day. And then she got involved at Love Never Fails and turned her life around. That was very insightful. Also with Alicia, deeply traumatized. And often we have this ideal in our, I mean, I can't watch movies the same way I used to, because there's this ideal in movies that there's human trafficking, sure there's prostitution that's bad, but there's also this sexy side, and it's this high-end call girl. And Alicia was that very high-end call girl. She was, an elite, very gifted, talented prostitute and gorgeous. And, you couldn't get near her for less than $1,000. But hearing her story of being abandoned and molested when she was 3 years old, and then this deep trauma that then made her, begin to act out, and then the addiction, the deep addiction that she got in, she was being, although she was bringing in a lot of money, so she was valued and protected from that sense, but it was just exploited the whole step of the way, and then ended up as crazy as you can imagine. Like, think of the most crazy homeless person. She was worse than that. And Love Never Fails embraced her journey. I'm taking a story. I was able to talk to her for over an hour and cutting it down, but now she is transformed, filled with life, happy, in a sane mind, sober, off of all of that. And she's a leader helping others. That interview deeply impacted me. And I mean, that's why I'm in it. That's why I stick it out. We talk about entrepreneurship is like getting hit below the belt over and over until you get used to it. That's what entrepreneurship is like. And that's what drives me. And going forward is seeing these amazing leaders, whether it's, Teriel and Alicia, or, the interviews I did with, the people I've met from inside the prison. Those are the highlights, and that's what keeps me going.
Yeah, you obviously showed two ends of the spectrum with similar trauma, and it's just so impactful to kind of dive deeper, right? Like, there's this level of humanity that really provides a lot more insight into like how we treat, knowing that, this could be your mom, this could be your sister, this could be your daughter, and hearing these things and kind of connecting them really shows, why you're able to do these things so well, because not only do you provide that story, but you provide the level of, again, empathy and understanding what and how we can kind of explore these things in a way that anyone can understand, right? Because having a podcast really has that long form content that kind of drives that ability, right? I'm going to pivot for a quick second. One of the things that obviously that's very promising, and I should say promising, I should say that shows me promise, right? As someone of faith, but not necessarily connected to it on a regular basis. This reminds me to be thankful and be grateful. You have this faith-based like initiatives. How are you able to like play into collaboration with these companies in the way that you can involve faith? Because I feel like sometimes, we talked about this earlier, but like, I want to dive a little bit deeper and understand how you kind of integrate these things in a way that is so seamless. You know what I mean? Because it's just, you're braving, you're brave to like just push these boundaries and know that you can still do it regardless, just based off your experience and your mission.
Well, first of all, we lead with what we're doing. So we lead with social impact, okay? And we're deeply motivated by our faith, but Innovate's not a faith-based organization. I actually believe everyone's motivated by our faith. You know, like the things that are most deepest to us, we can't prove, but we believe them one way or the other. Okay. And so, like, Love Never Fails, they are a faith-based organization and they incorporate faith. But like, one of the things we do is we have the IT Biz Academy. And originally that was launched to help survivors of human trafficking get a skill that was highly employable so that they wouldn't be vulnerable anymore. We soon found that that had a niche far bigger than that, because it's touching everyone who's vulnerable, whether they've been through human trafficking or not. And they do an excellent job of trauma-informed training, and they're equipping minorities, women, Black and brown, men as well. And everyone talks about that. That's one of the sexy things in Silicon Valley is minorities in tech. Well, very few actually do it very well. And Vanessa has a background. She was a sales executive at Cisco, so that was a very natural fit. She's a bridge builder. And so when we go to tech companies, we sell them on the value we want to do. And I don't want them to just say, oh, wow, human trafficking is important. That's the right thing to do. I want to be merciful. You know, I want to do right here. I want to give to help you eliminate human trafficking. I think we should all do that, and we accept that, and we want people to be motivated that way. But I'm trying to sell the technology companies on saying, listen, the health of your company means you have to get good employees. And it turns out that you think the people that are traumatized and survivors of domestic or of whatever are not good employees. That's false. In fact, we just had another like anecdotal study, it wasn't a full academic study, that demonstrated that survivors of trauma are better than the general population at cybersecurity. Okay. So yes, there's problems if you hire a survivor or someone who has a trauma background, but we'll equip you and show you these people make great employees. You need employees, invest them. And plus they're not coming from anywhere else. They're right here. And it's a great value proposition, bang for your buck. And I want to tie into their profit motive. To me, is when we can align profitability with doing the right thing and find that space, that's when we're going to be able to scale it and grow it and scale it. And that's the secret sauce. So when I'm coming to tech companies, I'm selling the value of what we do. Like even going into prisons, like, you know, or even homelessness. Like, listen, we are all want a good, prosperous society. And it turns out that if you partner with us, we're really, really good at making social impact. And you partner with us, we'll make your cities better, and it'll be better for everybody. And that's good for your bottom line.
And I'll make it personal. So, you know, I've been running tech companies for 20 plus years, and Ted and I worked together for 11 years. And so a practical way that Ted has collaborated with me and our company is he came in as our chief of ethics. Well, because our company is built upon super advanced AI, super advanced cryptography as a media company, our executive team perceived that having a chief of ethics was not only a wise thing to do in terms of like the benefit, but also maybe a necessity because of what the tech that we deal in and the way that we plan to scale to billions of users. So if that's our intent, then we probably should have somebody that's really setting the tone. So that's a collaborative thing. Now, what does we get out of it is Ted sat down with me when I had the idea 7 years ago. And so Ted was a co-founder because Ted's interest in Ian, me, and my next company allowed Ted to be like, hey, let's grab a meal. Let's hang out. Tell me about what you're thinking. And I'm like, I think this is what's next. I have this vision of what could be. And so Ted starts to lean in. And ultimately, Ted is now the co-founder and chief of ethics. Now, what does Ted get from it? Well, he gets validity in the tech environment. So now when he's going to the Facebooks and the Googles and the Microsofts and the Amazons of the world, and he's interacting with middle management and senior leaders, and he's having conversations, he can be like, yeah, I'm also at a tech company. I'm the chief of ethics there. Also, Ted has been able to be provided compensation throughout different seasons where we can compensate Ted for doing practical, tangible work for our company. And therefore, it's a way for us to provide some stability for him and his organization. Another thing is, if we want to do some sort of philanthropic giving, we could give directly to Ted's organization or through Ted's organization to others that he believes in. And so there's like this practical collaborative thing where if our tech company wants to do something good in the Bay Area, Ted's the first person that gets the call or the text message like, hey, what do you think about this? Another thing is like innovate. Innovate is done in partnership with multiple tech companies, and ours is one of them, as you might imagine, with Ted being a part of it. And so it's like he needs a brand style guide done. It's our designer that he reaches out to and contracts to do it. He and whatever it is that he needs done, he's able to kind of lean on us. And then when we're looking to connect with other tech companies or nonprofits, our product is now at a place where we see lots of people in Ted's network using it. And so it's like this very collaborative, cohesive, and has a nice rhythm to it. So I'm not the only one that can make this personal. There are dozens of other peers of mine in the Silicon Valley that would say something similar, even if it's not the same. It has similarities in terms of like, they say, oh yeah, having Ted in my world is huge for me. And I'm finding ways to make sure that when I'm in Ted's world, it's big for him. And so I think Ted is the prototype of collaboration between tech initiatives and humanity initiatives, or what you might call a faith-based tech initiative. Because Ted is prototyping it as a forerunner, right? He's the one that's kind of leading the charge. And then other social entrepreneurs look at what Ted's doing and go, I should run that direction. That's a good idea. And then other, entrepreneurial, men and women they go, wow, I should be working with a guy like Ted. So in many ways, Ted is kind of forging new ground, right? Laying new road in terms of how can these things be done, not just in a silo where it's just Ted and me or Ted and a few people, but that Ted's setting a trajectory by which people like him and his peers can start to think through collaboration in a way that everyone at the table enjoys the meal and everyone there gets to partake in some sort of great progress and benefit practically. We don't hear you.
Good. Yeah, I think you're muted.
Oh, okay. Let me check now.
Yeah. I mean, we desperately wanted to hear your voice, so I had to say something.
I wanted to say I love this, and this came to my mind while you guys were both sharing your journey, and it's something that reminds me of a great man that was impactful in Silicon Valley, Bill Campbell. I'm sure you guys all know him. I see Ted as a sort of Bill Campbell, but instead of being like the business focused kind of person, which you obviously are, bringing down the barriers there are right now in Silicon Valley. And I think that approach is like the modern day Bill Campbell, getting into these tech companies, trying to empower them by sharing spirituality and a new approach on like helping everybody come together. And trauma is also a big factor that I also love hearing people like Timothy Robbins saying that it's like a superpower. And I want to really hear your thoughts about that. Like, if you were to compare yourself to somebody like Bill Campbell, how do you see yourself right now and the journey that you're on? Because I see the similarities very much in what you're doing.
Well, I got to do some research. I don't know who Bill Campbell is.
No?
No, who's Bill Campbell?
I mean, go ahead.
They call him the $1 trillion coach. He was involved into Apple, into Google, into Microsoft.
Okay, I might know who you're talking about. Okay.
He spoke at the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center right when we were doing all those events there.
Okay.
So we've been around Bill, but it just didn't ring a bell. But yeah, he just consider him like, everybody's uncle in the Silicon Valley back in like the, 70s through 90s type of thing.
I don't know. I mean, I feel my superpower is I don't know when to give up. So, and I love to learn, obviously basketball is a big part of me. I'm quite tall. I'm 6'9", so that's a talent. playing basketball, but I was a late bloomer, but I loved playing. I had older brothers. My brother we'd play one-on-one and he'd beat me up all the time. Like, I never won a single game, not a single game ever. Finally, when I got stronger than him, he switched to mind games, and I have not won a single mind game against him ever. But I just love playing, and I just never give up. And suddenly, when he graduates and leaves, I realize I got the better half of that deal. He made me tough. And it's just enjoying the process, loving people, and, trying to stay teachable. And, I think one of the biggest challenges we have is there's a time, I understand last year people were political. Okay, if you're going to play to win, get in. It's an election year. The problem I have right now is when I see the people, they're still running an election year. Guys, get the memo. One side won. They won decisively. If you're that side that won, show up and put out, and you should start listening to your critics, because now you're going to be judged by what you do, not just whether you got voted in. And at the other side, stop whining and complaining. 4 years from now, almost inevitably, you're going to have a shot. That's how our system goes. Okay. Let's make the world better, and let's stop listening to our own PR. So I try to stay in that place of saying, okay, ultimately, I only have control over myself. Okay. Ultimately, I might think I know something. Maybe I don't, maybe the reason I've become an advocate and am able to build bridges is not because I was this great saint, but because I was racist. I just inherited that. I didn't know, like all of our society, but is being confronted by that and pulled that out. I had biases, I have prejudice. Maybe I still need to learn, and having a growth mentality of believing that the best is in front of us and projecting forward and saying, wow, I can still act upon it, and just loving the game, loving the process, loving people. And I try to stay in that place. And if anything, that's my superpower.
Love
and
that.
my friends.
That's
I have an
amazing.
incredible network of people like Ian, my wife. She's my real superpower. My wife.
It's true.
Well, you talk about family, and now I need to ask, how did you involve your family on your mission and on your journey that you're on?
To me, that's the most important thing. I'm a partner. My wife is different than me. I am crazy out there, and she's the exact opposite. She manages. We have 4 kids. They're all, 26 to 18. So they're all sort of grown up now. Kids do not mature. The brain, this is brain science, Huberman, not me. So, the brain does not fully develop till you're 26. So as a parent, this idea that you're done with your kids when they turn 18, just not true. Okay, they need you until they need you the whole way, the whole time. How we've involved them, we chose to homeschool our kids, particularly so they could travel with me. That was incredibly rich. My wife is my most important partner, so processing everything with her, not being afraid of challenging conversations and giving her permission to speak her mind, and learning from her in that way, and realizing that, maybe I could win an argument with her, but it doesn't matter. She sees things that I can't see. So don't try to win an argument, try to listen, and, stay in that place of relationship and peace. And that's how we've involved them. And it's been beautiful listening to your kids too. Like, that's super important, whether it's as simple as their input on, fashion. Okay, do I look cool? Okay, if they say I look cool, I've
been there.
Okay, or
I
just,
feel you, man.
Is this podcast boring or is it cool? Okay, if they say it, that's great. Listening to them, bringing them into that, and it's been wonderful.
Yeah.
And seeing the value of it, and rather than trying to balance it, I've never been a balance guy. It's integration, synergizing, you know, bringing my kids along with me. And we've been in organizations, and now we intentionally create organizations where we allow for that, you know, rather than touching DEI as a quota, of seeing that, no, we want diversity of thought in our organization. And in this case, we want another generation, a younger generation, and we want to encourage them to participate and to speak their mind. Why? So that we can think better, because it adds value, not just, you know, now DEI is a bad word and everyone's reacting back against it. Right. No, I'm saying bring in diversity because it adds value. And so that's my answer, is one, being very intentional, seeing the value of it, and then taking the risk and not being afraid to be countercultural, you know, like show up at places and, you know, you got your kids with you and everyone's, it's awkward. Well, then Elon Musk does it, and then now everyone can do it, you know.
Right. So. Well, Ted and Xiao and Grim, thank you so much for being a part of this. Ted, thanks for sharing your story, your vision with us. The questions that you both asked were great. And it's just nice to bring new friends in to meet Ted and hear his story and, you know, spark new ideas for him to talk about.
It's such an honor to be on the inaugural, you know, Ian
Ted's
Fireside
number
Chats.
one. Ted's
I am
number one. He's got all of his kids chanting that every time I come over. I don't know how much he pays him to do it.
My older brother's name is Dale, and he used to have us walk around and we would say, vote for Dale. Only I couldn't pronounce Dale, so we'd call him Ale. So we'd say, vote, but I didn't know what vote meant. I thought it was boat. So I was walking around saying, vote for Ale, vote for Ale, vote for Ale. And I thought that was, eventually someone would give him a vote, you know, like that was kind of my view of the economy and the politics back then. Vote for Ale.
Vote for Ale.
So yeah, this is going to be the biggest, the number one podcast out there, and I get to be the first Fireside Chat. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Honor.
Well, I think creating a podcast or a conversation that's live streamed is art in and of itself. I think there's a couple types of art that are not really appreciated to the extent they should be. Food is maybe the most important art that's created in the world. Use all of your senses to enjoy food, and food feeds you and it brings people into community. I think podcasts are another form of art that certainly don't have the honor and respect that music does, or a lot of other forms of communication. And so a lot of times the point of doing these is to have a conversation, you know, to make new connections. And so thank you for being part of that. And, you know, today we highlighted really the importance of social impact, the significance of being a social entrepreneur, the potential of bringing together faith, nonprofit spaces with tech and innovation spaces, and the way that you're doing that. Of course, I want to encourage everyone once again to follow Ted Hahs, TEDHAHS, and his Innovate brand, INNOVAT3IO. And join us next time. I think I'm going to change this from Ian Utility Fireside Chats to Ian Utility Beachside Chats, because I tried to get the fire on the screen behind Ted and the mirror behind me. And no matter how many times I worked on yanking things around and pulling angles, I could not figure out how I was going to do it correctly.
Well, I'm so close to the fire that I might be sunburned. We'll see. It won't be bad though.
Yeah, you're going to have a bit more of a tan on your right side after today. So there we are. We have the beach behind us. You know, we recognize the wonder of being in an environment like this, and wherever you're watching, maybe you don't have that same environment. Maybe it's hotter or colder, or maybe it's not, it's more urban or whatever it is. But you know what? There's a lot of people in Santa Cruz that could come down and just be right there at the Capitol Venetian and make content. People in Santa Cruz can go over to that wharf and make content. They can go sit on the sand. They can float on a paddle board or a boat right here, but they don't. And so my question to you is, if you want to tell stories, if you want to cultivate conversations, if you want to hear stories from people in your network, and you really want to press in, where can you go within walking or driving distance that you can show the beauty of your environment? Because even things that not everyone thinks are beautiful, some people will think are beautiful. And so, as you consider, like, oh man, what a cool spot. I wish I had that spot. Yeah, I did too. I built this where I live, and this restaurant, and this coffee shop, and built all this with my dad 22 years ago. We don't own it. It was just a thing that we did as contractors. I remember sitting right there when I was, it was 24 years ago. I was 21 years old or 20 years old. And I remember sitting right there eating my sandwich and thinking to myself, man, I want to live here. And then, a couple of years ago, it opened up and I was able to. And so, what are you manifesting in your life? What do you desire for your future? And are you doing the things possible to drive yourself to attain the things that you perceive are important to you? Because if you're a person that is sitting and saying, I wish I had this, I wish I had that, the question is, are you setting your mind on it and then doing whatever work is necessary to prepare yourself for that moment so you can be positioned, right? It's like you want to be in basketball, right? Ted always wants to make sure he's positioned on the court so that someone can throw him an assist and he can score. He always wants to make sure that when he's driving down the court that he throws the assist to the person in the right position. Whatever you want to call destiny or purpose or, however you want to see the creator of all things, are you positioning yourself? Are you setting your sail in such a way that the wind can blow through it and can propel you toward what you perceive is most important? And I think there's something important about telling stories. And so it doesn't matter that I create content across half a dozen channels. It doesn't matter that I just pumped out dozens of hours of content around my 40-hour water only fast, or all the things I do around the different things. Starting something new, an Ian Utility beachside chat or fireside chat, whatever I just settle on, the purpose is there's something meaningful about sharing another conversation with Ted. Because think about the dozen people and dozen organizations that Ted got to talk about by name, share their websites, let people that watch this later follow up. And finally, to our audience, thank you for your attention. We appreciate you taking a moment to listen to this conversation and engage with it. Obviously, we'd be grateful if you would leave a comment, if you would like and share this and allow us to reach more people with it. And if you have any suggestions, feel free to pump that in there. And you might find this on my page or on Ted's Innovate or his personal page, or maybe from where we posted on our Web3 AI or Attention Live, or wherever you find it. Engage with the content. It's one of the things that we as content creators ask for, right? We don't have a sponsor for this. We don't have an advertiser for this. We didn't take a commercial break. And so what we ask for is like engagement. We acknowledge the significance of your engagement and attention. So until next time, I say peace to you, and I look forward to another opportunity to bring something of value to you in the future. Thank you, my friend.